Alberta Primetime with Michael Higgins.
Welcome to Alberta Primetime. Ahead tonight, our politics panel on calls for a treason investigation into the actions of the Smith government. But first, focusing on affordability.
All across our province, families are feeling the pressure of rising costs.
Albertans deserve relief and the freedom to use the relief where and when it matters the most for their families.
Calling it an affordability measure, the Smith government will give millions of adult Albertans a $100 energy rebate this summer, a one-time payment in place of removing the provincial fuel tax. And it comes as the opposition puts forward an economic strategy of its own. And Raki Pancholi, Deputy Leader of the Alberta NDP, joins us now. Ms. Pancholi, good to have you back.
Thanks, Michael. It was good to be here.
Now, before we get started on your party's economic vision, let's touch on that $100 energy rebate. As an affordability measure, how far do you see it going?
Well, as anybody who has filled up a tank of gas in Alberta in the last few months knows, it's not going very far. I just filled up my tank from almost empty, and it was almost $100. And so really that $100 rebate is not going to go very far. And the UCP has their own legislation in place that, triggers when they would give a relief at the pumps by suspending the gas tax. And they've clearly made a calculation that giving $100 to some Albertans is going to be cheaper for their coffers than it is to actually follow their own legislation and give Albertans the gas tax relief that we know they desperately need.
Okay, so that means then that you would prefer that the fuel tax
absolutely
come off
we've been
place
calling
of this measure?
That's right. We've actually been calling for that for months now because we've seen the gas prices, everybody has seen the gas prices go up so astronomically, and the UCP relied heavily on the fact that their legislation wasn't triggered yet because it had to be 3 months of high prices, and just as we're hitting that 3 month of high prices that would trigger their legislation to give that relief from the gas tax, they announced this instead. And this is about saving the UCP money, not actually helping Albertans pay their bills. That $100 is not going to go very far. Not all Albertans are eligible for it. And really, we need long-term, sustainable measures in place to support Albertans during an affordability crisis that they've been experiencing for a number of years. 60% of Albertans say that meeting monthly costs is becoming more and more difficult. This one-time payment of $100 is not going to help anybody but the UCP.
Do you see it as a one-time payment, or does the government move and make it a quarterly payment?
Well, that's going to be up to the UCP, but I can tell you this is what we've seen historically from them as they make these one-time payments. I don't think it's a coincidence that it came shortly after the Premier's popularity has recently in polls tanked quite a bit. Of course, linked to the fact that she's dragging our province through a very divisive and unwanted referendum on separatism. And then the first thing she offers is a $100 to some Albertans. That feels like it's a very pointed way to try to use taxpayer dollars to get Albertans supporting the UCP government.
Who then, you say some Albertans, who do you feel is missing out here then?
Well, let's be honest, if the gas tax relief, that the law that is in place came into effect, every driver who is filling up their tanks would have access to a lower price at the pumps. They've put in eligibility requirements that say only households making under $225,000 will get it. So if an individual was single and they made $120,000, they'd be eligible, but as soon as they live in a household with somebody else, they may not be receiving it. We know that it depends on Albertans applying for this rebate. And Albertans are pretty stretched really thin in terms of the stressors and things that they have to deal with. This is not going to be relief for all drivers. It's going to be relief for one time, for one tank of gas for some drivers. And really, it's about saving the UCP money, not Albertans.
Let's talk about your party's economic vision. It focuses on jobs growth, responsible government, and Albertans sharing in economic success. How do you see this differing from what the UCP government is doing already?
Yeah, so earlier this week, we launched our economic strategy. Naheed Nenshi, our leader of our party, was in Calgary announcing it at the Calgary Chamber of Commerce. I've had the opportunity to present at a number of chambers in Lethbridge and Airdrie and St. Albert to talk about our economic strategy. It focuses on 3 pillars. The first is that we want to create good jobs now and in the future. We're going to do that by, we've launched our head office strategy, really bringing head offices to Alberta. We know how that stimulates job growth, but it also means that industrial decision-making is happening right here in our province. We've had many success stories around the province to point to. We should be bringing more of that here. We're going to focus on productivity, making sure that we're linking workers and their skills with the jobs that employers need. And we believe in shared prosperity for all Albertans. You know, at a time we have seen many Albertans talking about how, yes, maybe the economic indicators like GDP growth are high, but they don't feel it in their pocketbooks. They don't feel it in their household budgets. We know all Albertans should be elevated. We launched our affordability agenda just last week. It includes things like gas tax relief, but also things to bring down costs of groceries and utilities, raising the minimum wage so more people have more money in their pockets to spend. And of course, we also believe in responsible government spending. So we are committing as the Alberta NDP that in the term of one government cycle, we will balance the budget. Albertans want to see their dollars spent wisely, and so do we.
This has a bit of a feel of a campaign element to it. So why come out with this now? We're, what, 16 months away from the next general election? Or does this maybe have something to do with a by-election needing to be called in Calgary-Shaw?
You know, this is really about the fact that I think Albertans are getting exhausted by the chaos that they're seeing from this government. Right now, the whole province has been dragged into a separatism referendum. We know that that's driving away economic investment in our province. People are feeling anxious and uncertain. There's neighbors versus neighbors on this issue. And we think Albertans are kind of exhausted and done with the chaos. And so we want to show Albertans that there are alternatives, that it is possible for government to get back to work, doing the work it's supposed to do, deliver for Albertans strong public health services and public education services, but also deliver for a strong economic growth. So we're demonstrating to Albertans, yes, there is a separatism referendum. We're going to be out there talking about that because it's deeply important to the future of our country and our province. But we're also showing Albertans that it doesn't have to be this way, that there is a government in waiting, ready to do the work for Albertans to get back to the business that Albertans expect us to deliver on. And so we're laying those ideas out for Albertans to consider.
I think we're going into overtime here, but I want to ask a real quick question about the referendum situation. The Premier signaling this week that Corblund's no new coal mining petition question will not be on the ballot on October 19th. She calls it a complicated situation, and that it will be up to an all-party committee to determine a path forward. That won't happen until September. You sat on the committee that dealt with Forever Canadian. How does all of that fly?
It's really clear that the Premier and the UCP doesn't actually believe in the same direct democracy rules that she has laid out. When it comes to questions that the Premier supports, it doesn't matter if the signatures meet their mark or they are validated. She's willing to put a question on separatism to Albertans despite the fact that that petition didn't meet the mark. She changed the rules a number of times for that petition question. When it came to the Forever Canada question, we saw that that was dragged out because the Premier didn't like that question. And now on the poll issue, on the coal issue, we know that Albertans have expressed that they are deeply concerned about coal mining on the eastern slopes. The petitioners did the work. They went out, they collected their signatures, and now, because it's a question that the Premier doesn't like, because it challenges her government's position on coal mining, she's dragging out and delaying it again. It just means direct democracy doesn't mean much to this government. It's about the questions that they want to put to Albertans, the promises that they've made to their supporters. That's the only thing they're interested in following through on. I'm deeply sorry for all those Albertans who signed that petition on coal mining. They deserve to have their question put to Albertans.
All right. Well, we'll leave it there. Appreciate you coming in. We should point out as well that we have a standing invitation, an open invitation for the Premier to come on and talk about this as well. Ms. Pancholi, great to see you again. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Always appreciate it.
From the Smith government's new energy rebate to the opposition's economic vision and a call from treaty chiefs for a treason investigation. Time now for tonight's politics panel. And joining us this evening, Chaldeans Mensah, newly retired political science faculty member from MacEwan University, and Don Hill, co-founder of the blog Beyond Polarity, longtime broadcast journalist here in Alberta. Good evening to you both. And let's begin with the newly announced $100 energy rebate. Albertans with a combined household income of $225,000 or less are eligible for the one-time tax-free payment. The Premier says it replaces the fuel tax relief program. Applications to receive the rebate open on July the 1st. Chaldeans, as an affordability measure, how do you feel this should be weighed against the fuel tax option, a 3-month, 13-cent a litre reduction in the price motorists pay at the pump?
Michael, I think first of all, the affordability issue is a pressing problem for Albertans. The cost of living is just getting out of hand, and people need some kind of relief. But this announcement, I think this energy rebate thing is really a pittance in the broader scheme of things. However, I think it's going to help some families. The difficulty with the fuel tax relief is often when it's given out, it's not passed on by the gas stations, and that's the problem. So actually, it's better that people are going to be getting the cash, and then they can deal with fuel costs. But certainly, if you compare this to, say, Alaska, which has a dividend from the Alaska Permanent Dividend Fund last year paid $1,000 to each Alaskan. And of course, if you compare this back to Ralph Klein, I remember getting the $400 check. So this is a pittance, but I think it will help many families here in Alberta.
Don, to what degree could or should this rebate be viewed as a political choice on the part of the Smith government?
Well, just a few moments ago, we were seeing a picture of Ralph Klein, and we all recall back in 2006 that there was a flood of people just running over to Future Shop with that $400 to buy whatever it is that makes you happy in the electronic world. Now, Future Shop isn't here anymore. It's something else. But what I'm trying to get at is the government had to do something. The federal government did something, and it's politics. You're absolutely correct about this. Is it good policy? Well, as the Premier, I think, said, is that they were kind of hamstrung with June 1st, the 3 months. Since the Iran wars, April, May, June, yeah, right about that. So if it still goes on, then that gas excise tax, the government can revisit that. So they had to do something. Now, the problem is, of course, it's damned if you do and damned if you don't. You're not going to please everybody. But at the same time, quite a few people have $100 that they didn't have not even a week ago.
And Chaldeans, on the point of pleasing everybody, how far do you see this going to winning back support for the Smith government at a highly contentious time on a number of fronts, and when polling suggests the Premier's own approval rating has fallen to its lowest level since she took office?
Well, Michael, we have to put this in the context that there's going to be a general election next year, October 18th. So the parties are preparing the ground. When you see government spending money this way, especially in a direct way to help the population, you know that there's an election coming up pretty soon. So for Premier Smith, this is going to also pose some challenges, because we know that we've had a windfall from the Iran war. But oil prices are dropping sharply, and we also have a deficit. So I think she has to try and balance the two situations. But it will help her in the short term politically. But in the long term, we have to be careful because persistent deficits also create their own political problems.
Okay, speaking of parties plural, we heard from NDP Deputy Leader Raki Pancholi off the top on the opposition releasing a new economic vision that focuses on jobs growth, responsible government, and Albertans sharing in economic success. Don, we're heading into the summer months at a time when, well, honestly, many Albertans are fixated on debate over the separation issue. How do you see the NDP's message here resonating with Albertans this far out from the next election?
I'm just going to pick up from what I was saying a few moments ago. They had to do something. There's a lot of noise out in the public right now when we should be doing barbecues. I know it's raining a lot, but there's our conversations. Families are divided. Picking up from what the deputy said in the interview we did at the start of the show, Michael, is it was really short on details. I thought I was hearing Land of Hope and Glory in the background in my head, and a very small violin was being played, you know, like right there, that we're supposed to, you know, this. I don't hear anything of substance, and I think that's what. This is a good opportunity to say something that is going to be meaningful about, especially in the months to come when we roll up to October. As I've said in prior programs, this is all emotional, all of it. So if that was about striking emotions and saying, we're going to do something for you because we love you or something like that. I get that. Maybe that's the right thing to hear, but I would like to hear some details, and maybe that's what will be coming in the weeks or days to come.
Well, and Chaldeans, so how hard then do you see the NDP having to work to move the needle on this messaging? And is now the time to be putting a focus on economic vision?
Michael, the NDP has been very reactive. So this is positive in the sense that at least they have a vision. Details are lacking, but I think it's always good to have a vision of what you want to accomplish, but you have to provide some details. I'm particularly struck but that this program that they've outlined doesn't really touch on issues like pipelines and the importance of the resource sector here in Alberta. You know, there's a brief mention of energy in there, but I think you need to focus on what really drives the economy here in the province. Also, there's a talk of governments living within their means, and the NDP is promising to balance the operating budget within the business cycle. Well, that sounds a bit like what Mr. Khan is doing out there in Ottawa. There's no mention of capital budgets. We know the NDP wants hospitals to be built, schools to be built, but there's no reference to a capital budget. And finally, I think they have a very good program on affordability. I think they tackle on a minimum wage issue, boosting small businesses. Again, they need to flesh that out a bit and give people more detail in terms of how they are going to improve affordability before the next election.
All right. Time for us to take a bit of a break. But when we come back, the Premier's response to treaty chiefs calling for a treason investigation. More from our politics panel in a moment. Welcome back. A group of treaty chiefs is calling for a treason investigation into the actions of the Premier over the October referendum. And it prompted this response from Danielle Smith on Wednesday.
I would ask the treaty chiefs to check themselves because we have a very collaborative relationship between our government and our ministers. I want that to continue. But this kind of overwrought language has no place in a democracy.
Treaty 6, 7, and 8 chiefs unanimously passed a resolution this week calling for the RCMP and the federal and provincial auditors general to investigate the Premier and the UCP government. The group says calling a referendum related to separation risks Canadian sovereignty and the treaty relationship. It also says the group also says the government failed to take action when a separatist group obtained a list of electors. Chaldeans, how serious a situation is this for treaty chiefs to raise the issue of treason, and how worrisome might this new referendum element be for the Premier and her government?
Michael, this is worrisome. This is really the kind of language that you don't expect. And I think Dawn mentioned that this is becoming emotional, and emotions often drive this kind of messaging. So to really cite the Premier as being treasonous and calling for an investigation, I think it's a bit of an overwrought language. And look, the Assembly of Treaty Chiefs has been at loggerheads with the Premier. In February, they called for a non-confidence vote in the Premier. So the relationship hasn't been solid. And I think the separatism issue, which really goes to the heart of issues of concern to First Nations around treaty rights, is beginning to drive the emotional rhetoric. And I think that people should tone things down. And particularly, I'm worried about safety on First Nations territories with the rhetoric that is going on. So I think the Premier and the First Nations should really work out the relationship, rebuilding exercise, and get things on a proper footing here.
Don, what's to be made of the Premier's response? She also labeled the call by the treaty chiefs as disgraceful.
Wow. Well, anyway, as you can tell from her body language, she was pretty angry about what was being said and put on her table. I want to go back a bit to 2018 for a moment. My colleague, Donna Kennedy-Glantz, and I wrote a column for the CBC at that time, and we were calling into question Trudeau the Younger, the Prime Minister at the time, in 2015, and went to the New York Times Magazine and said that Canada was the first post-nation state, whatever that is, and also said there was no core identity in Canada. And at that time, the headline that came off at the time in 2018 was we were accusing the Prime Minister of treason. Now, treason, according to the criminal code, is if you're going to try and kill the king, what else? You're waging war against Canada, and what is this? Assisting the enemy within. So clearly the chiefs, if I've got this wrong, please correct me, are stepping outside of their lane and whipping up the crowd again. And as Chaldeans said just a few moments ago, there have been tensions between the chiefs and the Premier's office, even though she says there's quite a cordial and a to and fro. I think we're going to be in for a very interesting summer ahead, Michael.
Chaldeans, if in fact the RCMP and or the federal and provincial auditors general follow through and undertake investigations, how might that change dynamics around the actual referendum?
Michael, I think these are kind of issues that are really tangential to the referendum. There are bigger issues that must be addressed. For the proponents of this referendum and separation, there are bigger issues around the costs, around international recognition. Michael, you know that before a state is established, it has to win approval in the United Nations General Assembly, approved by the Security Council. How is a so-called Alberta state going to get this recognition? The cost of diplomatic missions overseas, and all the cost implications which are going to come out later. So I think that this issue that we're addressing regarding treason, as I think is really tangential, and it's not really a serious issue that I don't think merits investigation. Obviously, the Premier is not treasonous, but I think this is caught up in the rhetoric that is being pushed by the Assembly of Treaty Chiefs.
And Don, where does it leave the relationship? Brought up the Premier's office and the Assembly of Grand Chiefs. There's still a pipeline to sell to Albertans.
Yeah, this week, and who knows what's going to happen next week. I don't mean to shift the furniture on this particular issue, but I want to take the focus off of Alberta for just a moment and put it on Quebec in terms of their relation with their First Nations, mostly Cree, in Quebec. And let me just point out a couple of things, is that when the First Nations in Quebec presented themselves to the National Assembly in Quebec City, and they were in their full regalia, they were told they could not come into the Legislative Assembly because they were wearing so-called religious garb. Now, I don't understand this, is that poor old Premier Smith keeps on getting the hits from right across the country, and meantime, this behavior goes on in Quebec, and nobody seems to blink. Now, is it a language issue? Are we missing this in media for some reason? Or is it because we've been giving these folks a pass for so long, we don't know what to think about it anymore, so Premier Smith is a convenient target. I better be quiet because I realize we're running out of time.
We are. We're right out of time. Just have to leave it there. Great to see you both. Thank you.
Thank you very much,
See you later,
Michael.
Michael. Good to see you, Chaldeans. Bye-bye.
That is our program for tonight. Remember, you can always have a say. Email us anytime at comments@albertaprimetime.com. Coming up tomorrow, from renewed debate over a downtown Green Line tunnel to bracing for tough conversations on the future. We'll hear from Calgary Mayor Jeremy Farkas on Friday. Until then, have a great evening, everyone, from all of us at Alberta Primetime. Thank you for watching, and join us again next time.